Ladies and gents, good morning and welcome to Zero Day Con. This is our fifth Zero Day Con. My God, time flies. And it's our third in Ireland after a very successful Zero Day Con, which we ran in Washington, DC back in October. And today we've got a tremendous lineup of industry professionals, keynote speakers and panelists who are going to give you guys their perspectives and their insights into the industry. They're going to share with you their view on the cybersecurity landscape, the disruptive technologies which we're seeing coming down the tracks to influence digital transformation, the regulatory environment and how that's going to affect your business, and of course the cybersecurity risk that affects you as individuals, that affects business owners, and indeed that affects those of you who are empowered to protect your organizations, to protect their data, to protect their infrastructure, and to protect their people from cyber attacks and from cyber criminals. In the evening, we have our technical tracks, and that will provide a more intimate environment for networking with your peers and also for asking questions of the thought leaders who will be running those individual sessions. But one of the things I like to do at every Zero Day Con is I like to maybe reflect, I think I've only got a couple of minutes, but reflect on some of the talking points that we've seen from the year before. And my goodness, it has been a crazy year. If we look at from when we hosted Zero Day Con here last year. In Smart Tech, we work at the coalface of cybersecurity. We get to see the good, the bad, and the really ugly part of the industry as a whole. I guess if we were to sum it up, we would say that we've seen a increase in the sophistication of spear phishing attacks on individuals and on organizations. And that's primarily been driven by the bad guys' ability to leverage AI and to leverage the amount of data that's readily available out there on the dark web. The consequence of successful spear phishing is that you tend to see a lot of business email compromise. That tends to lead to things like invoice fraud redirection, and it also tends to lead to pretty serious incidents of ransomware attacks. Since the beginning of this year, we have been contacted by over 20 companies internationally, from Australia to North America to Europe, who have been victims of ransomware attacks. It's a horrible situation to find yourself in, and the type of ransomware that they're being hit with, it's not as high profile as Petya or WannaCry, but the consequences are just as devastating. And this ransomware targets your file shares, it targets your data backup, and a lot of these companies are left completely impotent in terms of trying to run their business. You then enter into a process where you have to negotiate with Russian extortionists. You end up provisioning Bitcoin, which is a pretty painful exercise, and transferring incredible amounts of money to these guys in the hope that you'll get your decryption keys back. So the industry, these standard type challenges are not going away. We've also had the mega breaches. And in these mega breaches, you've all probably heard of Starbucks or Marriott. And in that particular breach, it was between 300 and 500 million passport details were stolen and customer details. It was an interesting breach because of the data that was stolen, it was 5 million passport details that were unencrypted. And then there was 20 million that were encrypted. So Marriott had done a good job, except Marriott had let the decryption keys for that data on the same server. So they invited the bad guys straight to the cookie jar, opened it up and said, help yourself. What was also interesting about Marriott is that they're obviously a commercial organization, but it looks like it was a state-sponsored attack, and in this case, it was all fingers point to China. In addition, with Marriott, what it illustrated to everyone is that cyber crime and cyber attacks, they're no longer just a technical challenge. They are now also a financial challenge. And when organizations get hit with a cyber attack, we live in an era where hedge funds and institutional investors are watching for their ability to respond to these attacks. And in the case of Marriott, within 2 hours of the attack, being announced and the breach disclosure coming out, their share price dropped by 10%. And of course, people will argue that the share price will bounce back, and in most cases it does. But I wonder how often the people who are involved at the helm in terms of the breach, I wonder how often their careers bounce back. We also had IAG Group, or British Airways. I myself was a victim of that breach. Was 380,000 users, and of those 380,000 users, the hack was sophisticated enough. It was a type of skimming, and it affected anybody between the 21st of September and October 5th who transacted on British Airways website. What was really interesting about this case was that it was in the era of GDPR. So British Airways didn't even take the 72 hours, they just came clean within a day and said, look, we've been hit, and it's pretty sensitive information, it's your payment details. And for everyone that was affected, they then had to contact their banks and cancel their credit cards and get them reissued. How British Airways dealt with it in terms of the information they shared is questionable, but at least they came clean. Because if you look at all of the breaches that took place over the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a lot of organisations never disclosed the breach. So it shows that GDPR is working. But unfortunately for IAG Group, their share price as well took a hit and dropped by 5% on announcement of the breach. We've also had the circus with our tech giants, the Googles and the Facebooks of this world. We've seen the first regulator internationally in France, the INC, flex their muscles and issue the tech giant Google with a $15 million fine for alleged data privacy abuse. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think this iconic photo of Mark Zuckerberg in Congress really illustrates the profound problem that the world faces when it comes to social media. What struck me about this was the incredible discrepancy in the knowledge base between the senators who were interrogating Mark in Congress and our complete lack of understanding that Facebook generates revenue by monetizing data which we voluntarily serve up to them. And the consequences of nation states to influence the geopolitical agenda in the US, in Britain, in mainland Europe is a scary thought. We then have the Mission Impossible stuff. It's genuinely like it's come out of a movie. And it's where we see the attack on the supply chain. The big story of last year was the Bloomberg story on Supermicro. Was it a hoax or was it a hack? We don't know. What we do know is that Amazon and Apple have come out and they've stringently denied that it's happened. Typically, Bloomberg wouldn't be associated with the fake news, but they've stuck by their story. So I do believe there's more to play out in that. We also have Huawei, which is a fascinating story, and if you're following this story on social media or in the news, it's getting more and more interesting as the days go by. There's a race internationally by organisations to roll out 5G, and Huawei is a Chinese business which has grown to become the world's largest telecommunications equipment vendor. Huawei's equipment occupies every step of the network chain, between our laptops and our phones through to the data centres hosting the content which we want to access. Although it sells user devices too, its core business is network switches, gateways, routers and bridges. The kit that controls how and where data is sent, and this is the equipment that's causing all of the fuss. These infrastructure devices touch everything traversing the internet and are critical to it functioning properly. As Huawei is the biggest player in what is a critical part of modern infrastructure, it is an obvious and necessary candidate for scrutiny. And unfortunately, that scrutiny for Huawei is not going well. Western security officials have been especially wary of China's foreign policy, including its alleged ambitions to use business ties in foreign countries as elements of warfare. Much of this wariness can trace its origins back to a book that was written in 1999 by two Chinese Air Force colonels. The book, which was translated into English as Unrestricted Warfare, and described the strategy needed to win a conflict against the US. It formulated the idea that non-military means can be used to challenge a rival nation, including attacking telecommunications infrastructure or networks, or what we might call a cyber war. Academics and war experts have suggested that the translated title is more incendiary, and that the original Chinese phrase could be considered to be warfare beyond boundaries. But the assumed sentiment has influenced Western thinking. Huawei's network equipment could potentially facilitate espionage. Although it has not been detected in doing so, any evidence would mean a mass withdrawal of the technology globally. It would have to be a single-time action. This has prompted the concern that the equipment could be made not to function by the company or the Chinese government, essentially to take down telecommunications infrastructure during a time of international crisis. And such a move would inevitably compound the crisis and potentially have a critical damaging impact on the West's ability to respond to Beijing's actions. In terms of looking forward, I think I have 5 points because I'm out of time, but the five areas I think that are important to look at is, as the cybersecurity industry, we have a tremendous skills shortage. It's estimated in the region of 2 to 3 million unfilled vacancies by 2020. We have a tremendous diversity problem. We do not have enough females entering cybersecurity, and the technical roles, we see people moving into other industries. We're seeing significant advances in artificial intelligence, both on the good side and the bad side, with companies who are innovating and delivering incredible AI capabilities. But we also see the bad guys innovating, and the innovation that they're doing is leading to successful breaches within organizations. By 2023, 40% of I&O teams will use AI-augmented automation in large enterprises, resulting in higher IT productivity. We're seeing accelerated digital transformation, and we're seeing organizations driving operational efficiency by adopting clouds to accelerate their business. And through 2020, at least 95% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault. That loops back to organizations trying to drive their business faster, utilize cloud, but not having this technical skills and resources available to implement it. We're seeing a big increase in OT and ICS, the attack surface is increasing, and we're seeing organizations trying to secure that wider attack surface. And then we're seeing a profound change in the regulatory environment. We're seeing, primarily because of what we've seen with Facebook and some of the other tech giants, we're seeing the regulation changing primarily in the US, following suit on Europe. We've seen the California Consumer Privacy Act. We've seen new laws in New York State. So it's set up to be a fascinating year across all of these 5 areas and many more. So I'm out of time, so I would like to introduce your moderator for today. We were just arguing a moment ago that probably Ireland's top broadcaster, Jonathan Healy, and thank you and have a great day.